Iran's latest assault in Strait of Hormuz tells us everything we need to know. 2 ships, 2 different seas, set ablaze within hours of each other, and nobody is claiming responsibility. But the timing, the targets, the silence, it all points to one answer, one that changes everything happening in the region right now. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what Iran is really trying to do. Welcome back to the Siege War. Now listen, if you're someone who's been around long enough to remember when the news actually told you the full story, you already know why channels like this one matter. So do an old friend a favor, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell right next to it, and let's make sure you never miss what's coming next. And before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from tonight. Now, let's get into it. It happened within the same night. 2 ships, 2 different seas, thousands of miles apart, but both set ablaze at almost the same time. The first ship was moving through the southern stretch of the Strait of Hormuz. It was 9 nautical miles off the coast of Oman, near a place called Ash Shisr. A projectile hit the engine room. The ship stopped cold, dead in the water. The crew survived. Officials confirmed they were safe, but the ship itself was left crippled, floating helplessly in one of the most watched waterways on Earth. Nobody claimed the attack. No group came forward. No official statement. Nothing. But analysts tracking the region say the pattern is familiar. Small, cheap drones, fired from hidden positions, likely launched by Iranian-backed forces operating from nearby islands. It doesn't take a massive military to pull off an attack like this. It takes a few operators, a small drone, and the will to use it. That's exactly the kind of warfare Iran has leaned on for years. Not open battles, not direct confrontation, proxy strikes, deniable attacks, small weapons causing big disruption. At the same time, 600 miles north in the Red Sea, a second ship was hit. This one was a Saudi oil tanker. It was struck 64 nautical miles west of Yanbu, one of Saudi Arabia's most important oil ports. This time, a group did claim responsibility. The Houthi rebels, based in Yemen, said they carried out the strike. But here's what made this attack different. The ship wasn't hit in the usual location. Most Houthi attacks happened much further south, near a narrow passage called the Bab el-Mandeb. This tanker was hit far outside that zone, much closer to Saudi Arabia's own coastline. That detail matters. It shows the reach of these attacks may be expanding. It shows they're no longer just targeting ships passing through a narrow choke point. Now they're reaching toward the heart of Saudi oil exports. The tanker had also gone dark days earlier. It stopped broadcasting its location on August 8th, before the attack happened. Both ships, both hit almost simultaneously. Both linked back to the same source, even if no one officially says so out loud. Maritime security agencies confirmed both incidents. They logged the locations, the damage, and the uncertainty. Investigations are still ongoing. But while investigators search for answers, the wider region is bracing for what comes next, because these 2 attacks are not isolated events. They come during a period when tensions in the region have already been rising for weeks. The United States has been running a large naval operation in the area, aiming to keep the Strait of Hormuz and nearby waters open for global shipping. Billions of dollars in oil move through that strait every single day. Any disruption sends ripples through the global economy, and Iran knows that. Which is why, even without official claims, many believe these 2 strikes were designed to send a message that says, we can still reach you, anywhere, anytime, not through open war, but through pressure, through fear, through small, unpredictable strikes that are hard to trace and even harder to stop completely. For the crews on board those 2 ships, it was a night they will not forget. For governments watching from the outside, it was another reminder of how fragile stability in this region really is. 1 tanker crippled near Oman, 1 tanker struck near Saudi Arabia, 2 different attacks, 1 quiet, unspoken message behind them both. And as investigators continue digging for facts, one thing is already clear. The waters connecting the Middle East to the rest of the world are becoming more dangerous, more unpredictable, and more central to the next chapter of this ongoing conflict. What happens next depends on how the world chooses to respond. While the wreckage was still being assessed, Iran's leadership was already speaking, but what they said didn't match what had just happened. On Monday morning, Iran's parliament speaker made a public statement. He said that nobody believes in America's tough talk anymore. He called it empty pressure, nothing more than noise. But that statement raises an obvious question. If American pressure means nothing, then why does Iran keep responding to it with attacks? Actions tend to speak louder than statements, and Iran's actions, night after night, tell a very different story than its words. The same official also said the United States has no right to restrict global trade. He pointed to the naval blockade currently active in the region. He called it unjustified. But that blockade isn't hypothetical. It's real, and it's working. Numbers released by U.S. Central Command show the scale of it. Dozens of commercial vessels have been redirected, several have been disabled, some have been boarded to confirm they were following the rules. And the number keeps climbing week after week. Less than 2 weeks earlier, the count was under 60. Then it moved past 60. Then it crossed 70. The trend is not slowing down, it's accelerating. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman added his own comment. He warned that further escalation would bring consequences. He said Iran's hands are not tied. But that phrase deserves a closer look. Because what does hands not tied actually mean in practice? It means small drones, cheap missiles, proxy fighters, deniable attacks, not open military confrontation, not direct engagement with a powerful navy, just enough pressure to disrupt, without enough force to truly compete. This is the core contradiction analysts keep pointing to. Iran speaks as though it holds the advantage, but its actions reflect a country working with limited options. Every statement insists strength. Every attack reveals restraint, not because Iran wants to hold back, but because it lacks better choices. There's also the matter of money. Reports estimate that the ongoing blockade is costing Iran close to $500 million a day in lost trade. That is not a small number. That is not something any economy can absorb indefinitely. And yet, Iranian officials continue to describe their trading partners as standing firmly behind them, unaffected by the pressure. Analysts are skeptical, because when a country begins losing that much money every single day, its partners tend to become far more cautious than public statements suggest. Support has a limit, even quiet support. Even nations sympathetic to Iran's position won't ignore mounting economic risk forever. This is the pattern many experts have started to notice. The louder the rhetoric grows, the weaker the underlying position tends to be. It's a pattern that shows up again and again throughout history. When a nation is confident in its strength, it rarely needs to constantly declare it. When a nation is under pressure, it often speaks louder to mask what is actually happening beneath the surface. Iran's public messaging fits that second pattern closely. Bold statements, firm warnings, declarations of resistance. But underneath it all, a naval blockade tightening, trade numbers falling, financial losses mounting by the day. For now, both sides continue playing their roles. The United States expands its presence and its restrictions. Iran responds with proxy attacks and public defiance. But numbers rarely lie, even when speeches do. And the numbers, right now, are not in Iran's favor. The next question becomes obvious. If pressure keeps building at this pace, how much longer can that pressure be absorbed before something has to give? Start with par. While Iran leans on small, deniable strikes, the United States has been building a very different kind of answer. Not louder, not flashier, just far more efficient. The centerpiece of this response is a weapon most people have never heard of. It's called the APKWS, a rocket that was never designed to be a headline weapon. In fact, it was built for a completely different war, decades earlier in Afghanistan. Back then, commanders needed a way to hit a single vehicle without destroying an entire street around it. So engineers took a basic 70mm rocket and gave it a laser guidance system. Nothing fancy, nothing new, just precision, bolted onto something already sitting in military warehouses. That same rocket, built for a different battlefield 20 years ago, is now the answer to Iran's drone problem. Because here's the issue military planners have been facing. Iran's drones are cheap. Some cost as little as $20,000, but the traditional weapons used to shoot them down are not cheap at all. A single advanced missile can cost well over $1 million. That math doesn't work in a long, drawn-out conflict. You cannot keep firing $1 million missiles at $20,000 drones forever. Eventually, the cost becomes unsustainable. This is where the APKWS changes everything. Each one costs around $25,000. 7 of them can be loaded onto a single pod, mounted directly onto fighter jets already in service. That means one aircraft can carry the ability to knock down drone after drone without draining an entire arsenal in a single mission. And production isn't small either. One defense contractor has been manufacturing these rockets for more than 12 years. Earlier this year, they delivered the 100,000th unit. The military has also locked in plans for tens of thousands more over the next several years. In simple terms, America is not running out of these. Iran's entire strategy depends on the idea that the United States will eventually run low on resources, patience, or interceptors. But when the numbers show a steady supply chain producing rockets by the tens of thousands, that strategy starts to look far less realistic. And this weapon isn't just about defense. New upgrades are already underway, including a version equipped with an infrared seeker. That means future versions could lock onto multiple drone targets automatically, without needing constant guidance from the pilot. Fire and forget capability layered directly into an existing weapon system. Military analysts have pointed out something else important. This shift isn't really about superior firepower. It's about superior efficiency. Because right now, fighter pilots patrolling the region aren't limited to carrying 7 expensive missiles per aircraft. Instead, they can carry 20 or more of these lower-cost rockets, giving them far greater coverage against drone swarms. That difference matters enormously when facing repeated, overlapping attacks day after day. Meanwhile, the impact on shipping numbers speaks for itself. Despite continued attacks, the number of vessels successfully crossing through the Strait of Hormuz has not collapsed. In fact, shipping data shows crossings actually increased slightly during the same period these attacks were happening. That detail tells its own story. The blockade the United States has built is not weakening under pressure. If anything, it appears to be tightening. Ships that are meant to get through are getting through. Ships that violate the terms of the blockade are the ones being turned back, boarded, or disabled. This is the quiet, unglamorous side of modern conflict. Not massive battles, not dramatic confrontations, just steady, methodical countermeasures, cheap rockets, smart guidance systems, and a supply chain built to outlast the other side. For Iran, this presents a serious problem. Its strategy relies on cost imbalance, making attacks cheap for itself while making defense expensive for the United States. But the introduction of low-cost, mass-produced interception systems flips that equation. Suddenly, the side absorbing the daily financial losses may not be the United States at all. It may be Iran. And as production numbers continue climbing and blockade enforcement continues expanding, the gap between the two sides' sustainability grows even wider. To understand where this is heading, it helps to step back from the Strait of Hormuz for a moment. Because Iran's actions there are not happening in isolation, they're part of a much larger pattern playing out across multiple regions at once. Take Ukraine, for example. On the very same night the tankers were struck, Russia launched a massive drone assault against Kyiv. 150 drones and missiles fired in a single wave. Ukrainian air defenses managed to shoot down or jam the majority of them, close to 80%. But not all of them. Several got through, hitting targets across the city, causing casualties. Why does this matter to the story unfolding near Iran? Because it reveals something important about the nature of modern warfare itself. Across multiple conflicts, the same strategy keeps repeating. Smaller nations, or nations under heavy pressure, are increasingly relying on cheap, mass-produced weapons, drones, decoys, low-cost missiles. Not because these weapons are the most powerful available, but because they are affordable, deniable, and difficult to defend against completely. Iran is following this same playbook in the Middle East. Russia is following a similar approach in Eastern Europe. The common thread is simple. When a nation cannot compete directly with a stronger military power, it shifts toward asymmetric pressure instead. Strike quietly. Deny responsibility. Repeat the pressure until it becomes too costly for the other side to sustain. But here's the pattern experts keep emphasizing. This strategy only works if the other side eventually runs out of patience, resources, or public support. And right now, all the available evidence points in the opposite direction. The United States has locked in years of additional production for its low-cost interception systems. Shipping numbers through the Strait of Hormuz continue rising, not falling. The financial burden of the ongoing blockade continues to fall heavily on Iran, not the other way around. Meanwhile, Iran's own public statements reveal the strain building underneath the surface. Loud declarations, firm warnings, repeated claims of resilience. But rhetoric like this typically increases the moment real leverage begins slipping away. A country confident in its position rarely feels the need to constantly reassure the world of its strength. So what does all of this actually tell us? It tells us that Iran's approach right now is built entirely around one core idea. Make this conflict more expensive for the United States than it is for Iran itself. That's the entire foundation of the strategy. Small, deniable strikes designed to disrupt shipping, unsettle markets, and slowly grind down American resolve over time. But so far, the numbers simply don't support that outcome. The United States isn't running out of interceptors. It isn't running out of aircraft, weapon systems, or naval presence in the region. Iran, on the other hand, is reportedly losing close to $500 million a day due to disrupted trade. That is not a sustainable position over the long run. Which raises the most important question moving forward. How much longer can Iran continue absorbing these losses while still projecting strength through proxy attacks? At some point, economic reality tends to outweigh political messaging. History has shown this pattern before in multiple conflicts across multiple regions. Nations that rely on asymmetric pressure without a sustainable economic foundation eventually reach a breaking point. The question is never really if that point arrives, it's when. For now, both sides continue their current approach. The United States keeps expanding its naval presence, tightening the blockade, and scaling production of low-cost countermeasures. Iran keeps relying on proxy strikes, public denials, and defiant rhetoric aimed at both its own population and the wider world. But two ships disabled in a single night, hit within hours of each other in two very different parts of the region, tell a clear story on their own. This is not a conflict slowing down. It is a conflict evolving, shifting towards smaller, cheaper, harder-to-trace attacks on one side, and a quieter, more sustainable, more methodical countermeasure system on the other. The waters connecting the Middle East to the global economy remain some of the most closely watched, heavily contested spaces on Earth right now, and based on everything unfolding this week, that is unlikely to change anytime soon. What happens in the coming weeks will depend less on public statements from either side, and far more on which side can actually sustain the pressure it's applying for the longest period of time. Right now, the numbers suggest that answer is not in Iran's favor.